The Doctor Who Alhambra Podcast. Real Doctor Who fans with real Doctor Who opinions.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Doctor Who Podcast, a podcast dedicated to discussing and reviewing all things Doctor Who, Big Finish, and other science fiction stuff. In this podcast, I'm going to be looking at the controversial discussion that popped up in Doctor Who magazine 622, featuring former Doctor Who writer Robert Sherman and his discussion of the show is as dead as we've ever known it to be, as also some other discussions that I have found that circle the entirety of that talking point. I will often give my thoughts as well, too. So sit back, relax, and enjoy, because it's going to be, I think, an enjoyable time. All right, so I have this article that Liam sent me from drwhotv.co.uk entitled, Doctor Who is, quote, as dead as we've ever known it, unquote, says Dalek writer, Jubilee writer, it should be, Robert Sherman. All right, so let's just go straight to the point. I'm going to be reading this article and giving my thoughts. Again, I do have a couple of other things that I have found that go along with this, so please stay tuned for that. Again, give your thoughts and email the show at alhambraaudio@gmail.com. You can tweet the show at Alhambra Podcast. DMs are, of course, open. And we do have a Blue Sky account that, Anyway. All right. And so for this article, this was posted on the 9th of October, 2025. And it says, former Doctor Who writer Robert Sherman has offered a candid take on the current state of the show, calling it as dead as we've ever known it. Speaking in the Doctor Who magazine issue 622, Sherman, best known for penning Dalek, Jubilee, opened up about his complicated relationship with the show. He said, I go through phases. I have a real push-pull thing with the show. At the moment, I'm in the pull phase. It's weird because the show is probably as dead as we've ever known it. All right. So that's kind of an interesting quote right there. Push-pull phase. All right, so push into it, pull away from it. I guess the context right there is, I'm lost on the context early on in this quote using right here. So we will continue on, but I think with anything, with any hobby per se, I do think we all have a push-pull phase, if that's what he indeed is planning on referencing. We push in and then we pull away from it because life happens. Other interests, other shows pop up. For me, it was, I pushed in to Doctor Who in my youth. Then it stopped being consistent and or kind of good, hence the wilderness years. And I pulled out and went into Star Trek or whatnot. And, it took a while for me to push back in. So I if that's what he's referencing, I totally get it. I think it's understandable within every single fandom. I think even sports fandom has push-pull relationships where your team breaks your heart so many times that you push away from it. And then they start doing well, and then you pull back in. So he said Sherman went on to explain that unlike earlier periods of the show's history, he feels that there is now a sense of finality surrounding Doctor Who and its expanded universe. That's an interesting statement right there. That is not a direct quote. That is a consolidation of a quote. But I think that's interesting. I disagree with that. If you've listened to the ChatGPT AI self-created seasons, I feel as though, and this article does as well as something else I will pull up a little bit later, does go into, I think, how we can go forward with the show. It's not dead. It does need a pause. I'm all for a Wilderness Years Part 2. I'm up for a 3 to 5 year pullback, in all honesty. I don't think we need to retool it. I think fans of the show like, I think Doctor Who is a really interesting show when you think about it. When you look back at the original creators, or the original writers, showrunners, or producers, executive producers, and whatnot, it was a job. Liam famously went to a Hooverville and asked Terrence Dicks a question revolving around, would you ever go and write a show or a thing for Big Finish? Would you ever do this, bring back these characters? And I believe a couple other people have done it too with Eric Sayward. Liam didn't do it with Eric Sayward, but I believe the Tin Dog podcast did that, revolving around, what is it? The alien creature from The Visitation. Anyway, because, how he expanded that in his novelizations of Revelation of the Dalek, I believe it was the Revelation. Could have been Resolution. Not Revolution, though. But he expanded their, I almost came up with their name and my brain just failed on me. He did come and expand upon their culture and civilization a little bit within a Dalek book right there. And so it was asked, Terrence Dicks, would you do this? Would you come back? Would you do? And Terrence Dicks' reply to Liam was, well, if they pay me enough. And so I think the early creators, as much as we herald them as doing a great job for the show or whatnot, it was a job. And I don't think it took until around John Nathan Turner to show up for probably a legitimate fan of the show to take the main range and go with it. And maybe he went, too far. Maybe he did it, incorrectly at some aspects or whatnot, but he was a fan of the show. It went on hiatus. We had fans of the show doing Virgin novelization, BBC books. Big Finish came along a little while later, and fans of the show who became novelists or whatnot, and eventually actors like Mark Gatiss were writing and doing all these things because they were first and foremost a fan of the show. RTD, fan of the show, brought the show back in 2005. It passed to fan of the show, Stephen Moffat, and then you have maybe quote unquote fan of the show, Chris Chibnall or whatnot, and I think that's where things get murky. And then of course you have RTD Part 2, who I think is still a fan of the show, but he had a genre of TV and movies that he was more or less invested into since he stepped down in 2009, 2010 for the show. And I think he likes that kind of storytelling, those kind of narratives. And I feel as though he came back to the show and continued to put those narratives in the show, changing Doctor Who from a cosmic hobo traveling in time and space, solving crimes, to more or less preaching. And so I think there's a constant evolution of the show. And I think that when we pull it back, when we look at what Big Finish currently is doing, it is still being done by fans of the show. The AI stuff that I did in 2 episodes of this Dr. Alhambra podcast, I had it, give me, I didn't even tell it to storytell. I just wanted a story arc with some episodes that had a hint of an arc every so often, and then the final, baddie at the very end. And I feel as though ChatGPT and the other AI program I used did a really good job, because they were just because AI currently is just a predictive language model, and it took basic synopsises of so much things that are available on the internet, and then just created a storyline and some things. And it was I thought it was enjoyable. If you go back and listen to those podcasts, I thoroughly enjoyed both of them. I do need to do a part 3. I do need to get to some of the email that I got from that show, and then do probably season 3 of the AI years. But I do I think that there is a finality? I think there's a finality if we don't change where we currently are on how we're doing storytelling. I think that would be a finality. Let's see. Where are we? All right. So it says after 1989, we had After 1989, we had for years a current doctor. He said, now everything that is ever going to be produced in Doctor Who terms is going to feel retrogressive. Retrogressive? At least with the new adventures and the BBC books, you thought. It's currently Doctor Who McCoy or McGann. He continued, no one's going to start writing Doctor Who books with a Billy. Now, here is a really, really good, intriguing thought. No one is going to start writing Doctor Who books with a Billy Piper doctor because no one knows what that means. In a funny way, the closing moments of the reality war seem to put a full stop on things. We didn't have that before. And that is an interesting thing because you could say that it was casting to pull back an audience that really loved the 2005 series. But kind of like when Chris Chibnall created the Ruth Doctor, I feel as though that was, I want to have a multi-part Doctor story. I don't think I can do it. I'm just going to create this whole thing. I'm going to rewrite the history, and everybody's going to be happy with it because of this and that. And I think that was going about it completely the wrong way. Making sense of a story that we've discussed this so many times. Nobody said that they wanted from Bremen of Morbius further expansion on that. I think this was just Chris Chibnall's method of creating a multi-part Doctor story because, Matt Smith's star took off. David Tennant's not coming back. Peter Capaldi said he's never coming back. Christopher Eccleston at the time probably would never have come back also. And probably he still won't, except for audios. And so I feel as though he wanted his War Doctor situation. The difference between the Fugitive Doctor and the War Doctor is the War Doctor was supposed to be Christopher Eccleston, and it couldn't be. So you also needed to figure out what you were going to do with that. You also had a 50th celebratory situation, which required multi-part Doctor stories, similar to the 3 Doctors, similar to the 5 Doctors. The 2 Doctors just happened to be a thing because John Nathan Turner was a fan. However, you do have this thing, which was, let's celebrate this show. Let's have a multi-part Doctor story, but we're only going to have 2 Doctors. Okay, let's create one, which makes a whole bunch of sense. However, Chris Chibnall just wanted to create one so he could say, look what I did. Hey, Mom, look what I did. Could I put my art on the refrigerator? Almost. That's what I think happened. And so now, just like Robert Shearman says, that nobody knows how to start this book off, this comic line off. So the only thing that we can do is either A, write books during the Ncuti Gatwa area that might fill in some cracks, but won't, probably, because RTD did everything like really kind of close back to back with each other, similar to what Chris Chibnall did with the 13th Doctor. I mean, the other annoying thing just to take a side note, the other annoying thing that for the BBC, for Big Finish, for the 13th Doctor range, is they're going to be delving into, and from what Liam has said to me, is really do some good character development. Well, then all that character development gets flushed down the toilet once you continue on with the show that Chris Chibnall did, because he wasn't thinking with the stuff in between. He wasn't thinking about the fun parts. He was just thinking about, what do I need to do to get to this? What do I need to do to get to this? And not taking anybody's thought process, or, actually thinking what the fans would like. Anyway, I digress. It says, he continues, no one's going to... Okay, I read that one. Series 15 concluded at the end of May with Ncuti Gatwa's 15th Doctor regenerating into a surprise scene featuring Billie Piper. Since then, the future of the show has remained in limbo. The final decision on the show's co-production deal with Disney is reportedly not expected now until 2026, after the release of the upcoming unit spin-off, The War Between the Land and the Sea. And I mean, I will tell you, I think that is so, smart on both BBC and Disney, and also kind of cowardly. Like, we don't believe in ourselves enough to be able to have the show continue on or whatnot. And so I think this is a way of maybe pausing everything, maybe retooling everything, possibly kicking RTD out the door, maybe Bad Wolf out the door, and just to see where that lands us. I think there's a lot of interesting thing that's going to be going on with that. So, regarding this article, on a Facebook group that I'm on, they showed the article, the picture in question, and it says the show is dead as we've ever known it. Quote, Robert Sherman. Looking at these quotes, it's here are some posts that some of the I almost said family members, Facebook page members did. It says, Robert has made a very good point. At 1989, Sylvester McCoy, Sophie walked off into the sunset. Yes, some additional ADR was recorded for a holding pattern, thus leaving us with a doctor and a companion able to have unseen adventures. We then got those adventures through prose, comics, and other means. Yes, some of that prose was absolutely crazy, but some of it was excellent, and there was a little middle ground. Yet we still had a current and viable TARDIS team. A horrible saying, please forgive me for that. Fast forward 36 years, and we are left with a superimposed head on a pair of shoulders, mumbling hello, which seems like it was filmed in a changing room at a TK Maxx. I mean, what the crap can you do with that? No explanation, no logic, or assembling reason whatsoever. Personally, when you think of the excellent Robert Sherman's reasoning, it does seem pretty bang on. It has left us in a right pickle. Now, this person right here, I really like this next quote, and said, I live in hope. Me and this person, eye to eye. I was constantly telling Liam I had so much hope for, the Whittaker era. After every single episode that we got burned by. And then eventually during the Flux series, he sat it out for the most part of it. But I kept on stupidly, you know what? It's going to get better. It will get better. I believe it will get better. So I understand. I live in hope that it will return. But there is going to have to be some big rethinks. I have been defending the last few series and still think there was some good episodes. But having caught a clip of Capaldi's recently, there was a sudden thought of, oh my gosh, what have we lost? And it's nothing to do with the Doctor being a woman, a gay man, or whatever. That ethos has always been embedded in the program. For me, it is more about the writing techniques, which has become tell, not show, so that you feel preached at. and a seemingly timidly, seeming timidly with having an alien doctor who can be a bit crotchety, even dark. Anyway, though not my favorite doctor at the time, I'm off to do a binge watch and reevaluation of Capaldi before the writers became afraid. Interesting. I really like that because, yeah, I did live in hope, and I do think that it is the writing, it is the preaching, it is the show not tell. It is also the whole, like, how many times do we have to have the companion, the impossible companion? We had it with Amy, we had it with Clara, that we had it with Ruby Sunday, and Ruby Sunday happened to be nobody. Yes, she was the companion that couldn't be, how could she be? Because she was just a nobody. And for some reason, being a nobody saved the world. Really hard. Some people say that they will only come back if they reboot the show, ditch the whole team. I do agree. I think that this current production team cannot come back. Serial of 30-minute episodes. Oh, don't bring back any doctors from the new era for at least a couple of years. I'm fine with that. Yeah. Somebody said Doctor Who died in 2000. I don't like that. That's basically saying that there was no good episodes. There were. Kerblam was fantastic. The Angels one for Flux was great. There's a whole bunch of 7th Doctor episodes that I think are horrible, but some people really like them. And then one of the last people in the group said, for an ongoing story perspective, Rob's right. It is a bit of a stasis. It is in a bit of a stasis at the moment, thanks to the parting shot. No one's going to take on Billie Piper in other media. I mean, we can't, because we don't know where that's going to be going. How can we take on how can we have a take on this when the story hasn't even been told yet? The only thing that you could do is do fan fiction. That's it. Only fan fiction. And so unless you want to have a Tumblr account or whatnot, or create your own podcast or whatnot, your audio drama podcast of somebody being Billie Piper, playing Rose, playing the Doctor or whatnot, and have some sort of sensical thing. That is the only way that you can get that done. All right, so it says, no one's going to take on a Piper Doctor in other media, even assuming that's what she is. But it's an easy cliffhanger to resolve if whoever takes it on wants to go in a different direction. Billie will simply fade away and be replaced by the next Doctor. It will be put down to some hiccup in the vortex. On the other hand, we have plenty of past Doctors to produce stories in other media, so it doesn't stop. Then that's where I disagreed with Robert Shearman. The show's not dead. However, the other media stories, the big finishes, currently, I think they just barely finished a Sacha Dhawan Master comics for Titan Comics. Now they're on a Shooty story is what they're currently doing. Be interesting to see if they have to pull the 10th Doctor as a guest appearance for Shooty's Doctor, because that's the only way they could get the 13th Doctor's comics to be sold. Anyway, that being said, thank you for listening, downloading, liking, subscribing, whatever you are doing for the podcast. We do appreciate it. What are your thoughts about Robert Shearman? What are your thoughts about the future of Doctor Who? What are your thoughts of, should there be a Wilderness Years Part 2? Do you think we're just going to have a 2-year hiatus? Obviously waiting for 2026 for War Against the Land and the Sea, followed by, the figuring out of who the executive producer is for 2026, 2027, filming it in 2027, airing it in 2028 or so. What are your thoughts about that, the possibilities, and anything else? Thanks again for watching, listening, downloading, subscribing, and until next time, I will see you in the dollar section that's not the sign off. I will see you in time. You have been listening to the Doctor Who Alhambra Podcast. Doctor Who is owned and trademarked by the BBC. Doctor Who Alhambra is not affiliated with the BBC or Big Finish. No infringement is intended. Visit our website at alhambrapodcast.weebly.com or email the show at alhambraaudio@gmail.com. Tweet us at Alhambra Podcast. That is ALHAMBRA Podcast. Thank you.